Hi, my name is Victor Paul. I work at the University of Helsinki and I study environmental history. My goal studying environmental history is to explain two things. On the one hand, I'm employing environmental history to be able to contribute to the ongoing debate of sustainability and the global environmental crisis. How can humans solve this issue? Well, I think there is no easy solution. I'm a historian, so I mostly ask questions and I take past experiences, like the experiences of communist societies, into account, and I'm trying to interpret them in a way that they contribute to our understanding today. And the other thing is that what I want to do, I'm not sure I can ever reach that goal, but I really would like to understand Eastern Europe better. I was born in Hungary during the Cold War, and we did recycle a lot with my family, and at school we were very heavily and actively we were kind of brainwashed to pursue environmentalist goals as good social citizens. So as a young pioneer, I had to go through several lectures and various programs that concerned environmentalism, environmental awareness, protection of protected species, to understand to a greater depth the network of national parks, and to understand the complex interconnections in the natural environment. Some of these activities also included recycling paper, and recycling metal, and recycling other secondary materials that were considered to be important for the economy. Via that, educational experts in communist Hungary thought that young pioneers, children like me, would be adequately educated to understand humans' coexistence with the natural environment. And so when I went abroad several years later to study, I began to read the Western perception of the same period of time written by most of Westerners coming to Eastern Europe to do research. And what I thought was a different picture, in a way conflicting one compared to my childhood experiences. And in 2007, Zsuzsa Gille, a fellow Hungarian, published a very influential book. Gille was the first social scientist who provided an overview, sociological overview, on this contradicting picture. That there was one truth or one perspective that Western science, Western social sciences are claiming to be true or valid, and there is a different experience in Eastern Europe. And this led me to investigate environmentalism not from broader perspectives, but from different perspectives. And I think this is one of the very important lessons that environmental history of Eastern Europe can bring us. What I read in the research about Eastern Europe and its environmental problems was not fabrication. It was a very valid point, especially in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when there were tremendous environmental issues in Eastern Europe. Just think about Chernobyl. It's one of the largest nuclear disasters in human history. So it's impossible not to take that into account, but it doesn't mean that Eastern Europe as a whole is Chernobyl. There has been environmental catastrophes all over the world, regardless of political systems, and we shouldn't generalize and overgeneralize, taking one example, one horrible example, one devastating example, and put it over an entire geographical area, be it Eastern Europe, be it the Far East, be it Africa or Latin America, as a blanket. And I think that is very important, because what is often missing from discourse is taking the voice of the locals and taking the local knowledge into account when it comes to environmentalism. Several researchers prone to understand environmentalism as a movement that can exist only under liberal democratic conditions. There are several other ways to understand environmentalism, and in fact, it seems, based on the historical evidence, that environmentalism has been understood differently over periods of time and over different political regimes. So let me give you an example, and this is an article that I published recently, and you can see it you can see the link below. In this article, I tried to map out the environmental discourses of scientists, especially landscape planners and hydrologists in Hungary, in a long duration perspective. So I started to analyze their discourses in the beginning of the 19th century, and I went on throughout the 19th century, through the interwar period, and then the post-World War period. And what I was trying to do to see what they were saying and what they were discussing about, it was mostly river regulations and canals, irrigation, land quality issues, and agriculture. I mean, it's Hungary, so it's mostly it's in a bowl, in a basin, and river regulation has a very, very high importance that can be compared to the Netherlands. With regulating the rivers, Hungary is just a floodplain. People cannot, like 30% of Hungary is inhabitable if the rivers are not regulated by humans, and so the humans cannot settle like 30% of the area. And so these discussions were often very heated, but what I was trying to understand, where are these ideas coming from that these scientists are often employing? And it was very interesting to understand that some of the ideas came from the West. Some of the ideas were directly implemented from Western engineering and scientific literature. Some scholars are focusing on the knowledge they could gain from the Netherlands, but other scholars, especially after 1945, they were focusing on the Soviet examples and the Russian way of seeing the environment. And what the most confusing thing all about this was that you would think that during the Stalinist period in Hungary, that is between 1948 and 1953, Stalinist Soviet ideas were dominant, and the people who would follow these ideas, they would be the most prominent environmental proponents supported by the regime. But this is not actually what happened. What happened was that during the post-war period and in the Stalinist period, the specialists who were very influential during the interwar period, they were also supported by the new regime, and they were utilized by the new regime, regardless of their supposedly ideological preferences, and regardless of the situation that they were operating under a racist and xenophobic regime. And in the 1960s and 70s, several of the Soviet ideas became prominent, and they were many scientists were trying to implement that Soviet knowledge and import it. So these ideas coming from the West and some other ideas coming from the East, they merged in Hungary, and some sort of unique mixture was created, including the local knowledge, the local understanding that was stemming up from the environment that they were operating in. So, as opposed to several scholars who proposed in the 1980s and 90s and even up to today that environmentalism was something that was exported to Eastern Europe from the West, and they were studying from their Western peers about environmentalism, but obviously they were just lagging behind. This seems to be reflecting an image taken from one particular perspective, and that perspective is to take it from Western Europe and North America. This interpretation leaves out several other perspectives, and most importantly, it leaves out the perspective of the locals. It leaves out the credibility of local environmental information. It leaves out the possibility of creating environmental knowledge, developing environmental knowledge on site in Eastern Europe. And I think this is very important for us. This is a very important knowledge that we can use, and we can also use not only in the Soviet bloc, but we can use it also globally. I would like to see more research coming into the field, like maybe yourself, you're going to research Eastern European history and Eastern European environmentalism. And I really would like to encourage you to take this factor into account, that from a Western European perspective, it's very easy and comfortable and This might sound controversial to some, but it's also a neo-colonialist way to see Eastern Europe as backward, as a place that it had to, and it has to, and will have to catch up with the West. Why would that be? Why Eastern Europe couldn't have its own path? Why Eastern Europeans couldn't figure out their own ways of environmentalism and their own ideas about the environment? I would like to invite you to take that into account, and I would encourage you to go forward. After watching this video, please go ahead, ask questions, read the materials that we are providing with my colleagues. If you do that, I really trust that you would see Eastern Europe from various perspectives, and seeing one thing, one place, one object from a series of other perspectives that's just one. It is really enriching your studying experience that you will manage to create by the end of this course.